Hello, friends. Welcome to the Ancient Health Podcast, where East meets West, and I'm your host, Dr. Chris Motley. I have my good friend, Matt Maruca from Raw Optics here with me today, and Matt travels all over the world. We just talked before we jumped on here how jealous I am, and he is a leading expert in light therapy, how to use light, how to block the bad light, allowing the good ones to come in. He researches. He's out there in Germany right now doing it. Matt, thank you so much, my friend, for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, first of all, again, for everybody that is listening, I consider Matt a great friend, and he is somebody who's started a company. We put in the intro about how you started this company, Raw Optics, at 18 years old. And for people who may not know your story, brother, I really love light therapy, light healing, frequency medicine. And I know a lot of my listeners like it too, but could you tell us about yourself? I know you may have told your story before, but what got you into that drive to find out about light and therapy?
Yeah, of course. Well, I have always been pretty curious. And when I was a teenager, or even younger, I had some health issues, mainly gut issues, allergies, seasonal allergies, and headaches. And that caused me to do a ton of research into what was going on in my body and what I could potentially do about it after Western medicine had kind of failed me. The pediatricians prescribed me aspirin, or Advil, I should say, for my headaches and so on. I was being prescribed Tums for my gut issues and Zyrtec, and then horse pill, super jacked up antihistamines for my seasonal allergies. So there was no point at which Western medicine was looking at the root causes. And I experimented, with the help of my mother, with naturopathy and kind of yeast cleanses and this kind of thing. And all that helped, more than the Western medicine stuff, but I still didn't reach the root cause. Basically, I was struggling with a variety of gut issues, allergies, and headaches as a teenager, even younger. I tried Western medicine, for example, ibuprofen and all sorts of other options from the pediatrician for my headaches, Tums for my gut issues, and antihistamines like Zyrtec and Claritin for my allergies. And they just really weren't doing it. They weren't addressing the root cause fundamentally. And so I tried alternative methods like naturopathy, and this helped a bit more, but I still continue to struggle. And so as I went into high school, as I turned around 13, 14 years old, and I had the internet at my disposal, I basically just started reading everything I could in order to try to figure out the issues myself. And I came across diets, supplementation and all these things like the paleo diet in order to try to address my issues at a deeper root cause level rather than just the symptoms. And this opened my mind up to a whole new world, really, because I started thinking, wow, our ancestors did things differently. They didn't have all these modern illnesses. They had different issues, death in childbirth and infectious diseases and famine and wars and other pretty challenging things, which have been largely overcome in much of the modern world today. But they didn't necessarily die from the chronic illnesses, the kind of failure of the body to function properly that we're seeing today. And 1 in 2 people have a chronic illness today. I believe 1 in 3 people have 2 or more chronic illnesses. And so I started to become really fascinated by this concept that maybe we could live more closely to our ancestors and benefit from all of the technological developments and things that have allowed people to live safer and more secure, healthier lives in many respects, and not harm ourselves with, all the things we've created today that have these effects, whether it's processed food or, for example, artificial light. And I did come to learn about it through my research and my studies and experimentation, the significant role that light plays in health. And this was, really, really big for me because nobody had told me earlier on in the journey, 2-3 years earlier, which at that age, 13, 14, 15 feels like lifetimes. Nobody had told me that light had such a significant impact on health, especially by way of impact on our circadian rhythm and our sleep and cellular regeneration. So when I learned about this, I was fascinated, and I thought, how did nobody tell me about this sooner? How did I not hear about this? Yeah, even in the niche health and wellness world, but much less in the mainstream. I had never heard that of course, you turn the lights on and you see in a room, and that's pretty much all people think about light as doing, is allowing you to see. You walk outside, the sun's out, you see. You don't necessarily think that the reason that we're here is because of the sun, or the reason that the reason that our cells evolved, or the primary driver of evolution is the power of sunlight, and that it plays still such a significant role in health and our biological rhythms and all these things. That was not something I ever considered once. So it was a bit of a light bulb moment, pun intended. And I was fascinated. And then, one thing led to the next. And as we discussed, I'm sure a bit in the previous episode, I ended up starting a company making blue light blocking glasses, or blue light protection eyewear, because it was one of the things among many that I learned we could do to improve our health with light, was to block the wavelengths from artificial sources that create disturbance and disruption in our cells and in our
Oh man. This is like when you talk about health. I remember when we talked in our last convo, my man, it was really interesting to me. So I started to study a bit about mitochondria and about the effect of light on mitochondria and the right type of light and just energy production. Could you touch a bit on just how light affects the cell and how it can actually help it propagate, help it do its daily job?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's good timing because I'm here, as I mentioned, in Germany with my chief scientific officer for my company. And we've been talking a lot about these things. But basically, light helps a lot of biochemical reactions occur. Or said another way, a lot of biochemical reactions evolved in a particular environment under the sun, outdoors in nature, and with a certain type of energy available, in this case, sunlight. And so these reactions naturally came to utilize this available energy in order to support them. If you wanted to go kind of even deeper, some experts argue that light actually, in many ways, drove the evolution of biochemistry and biology and different biochemical pathways and so on. So light plays a significant role, right? And one obvious example that pretty much everybody's familiar with now is vitamin D. Without sunlight, we can't make vitamin D the way we're designed to. So it's a solar hormone, so to speak. But one big way that light affects our cells is red and near infrared light. They have a really significant effect on ATP production in the mitochondria. So there's thousands now of clinical studies, peer-reviewed research on how red light increases energy production in the mitochondria. So when our cells are exposed to this which is a part of sunlight, this range of light, it literally allows them to make more ATP, more energy, which is the kind of currency, the energy currency that all of our cells use to do all the things they need to do. And so it almost can't be overstated that when we have healthy biological functioning, we have a lot of energy, or when we have a lot of energy, we have healthy biological function. So a top doctor in the field of mitochondria and cellular energy production named Dr. Douglas Wallace from Philadelphia, or he studies in Philadelphia. He's based in Philadelphia. He's not from there originally. That's where I'm from originally in the States. I went and met him when I was a teenager, and I was fascinated and, still was becoming fascinated by all this stuff, still am. But he found that with his team over decades looking at mitochondrial genetics, that modern diseases all share a common root cause in mitochondrial dysfunction. So basically, the cells are not able to make enough energy to carry out processes properly. So whether you look at diabetes, obesity, Alzheimer's disease, other neurodegenerative diseases, cancer, developmental diseases like autism and so on, they all share a common thread of mitochondrial dysfunction, lack of ability of cells to produce energy properly. And it makes sense. I use the example of like a government, which has a huge budget, or I should say a huge amount of expenditure, but a lack of budget to fund that. So certain programs are going to have to be shut down if you lack the budget to fund all your expenditures. Well, or you could just run a deficit, but in biology, you can't run a deficit. In biology, things need to shut down. So basically, if the mitochondria are in an environment which is so foreign to them, which isn't where they evolved to make enough energy to be able to carry out these high level functions like a functioning brain, human brain, and so on, then certain things will work less well. And that appears to be the main root cause of modern chronic illnesses. There are many other factors, that affect mitochondria besides just light, chemicals, processed low quality food, and so on and so forth, right? But it's kind of something that ties it all together. So basically, going back to how light can affect cellular energy, if we want more energy so that we don't have diseases and our cells function optimally, and the research is very clear that red and near infrared light wavelengths allow our cells to make energy optimally. I wouldn't say it's like red light therapy just improves cellular energy production. I would say it brings it to the baseline of where it was designed to be throughout evolution and nature. So that's one really powerful example of how light affects cellular energy production and health and can strengthen and benefit our cells. And just like the saying goes, a rising tide lifts all ships, right? So if you improve, it's not like you need to treat each system differently, which Western medicine does. Of course, it really separates out all the different systems and you go see different doctors for different systems. Whereas traditional medicine, although it can address specific organs, it's generally focused on how to improve the system as a whole. And so things like red light therapy can actually help benefit overall biological functioning. There are more things we can talk about of how light affects cells, but that's a great place to start, I'd say.
That's great. I mean, like with red light though, people would ask like, Matt, like what is like the best, infrared or far or near infrared technology, but is there a particular time of day that would be best? Like when people get the red light that they should be out, like if they can come into contact that would be good for their cells, like a part of the day?
Yeah. So if starting by looking at evolution and the natural environment in which we evolved, red and near infrared light predominate throughout the entire day from sunrise until sunset. So as we get to midday, there's quite a bit more blue, short wavelength blue light and ultraviolet light, which is the part of light we know that can be damaging, especially in excess. Cells attempt to protect against this light because it is toxic for cells, again, especially in excess, and for living systems in general, living organisms. So, but as the sun gets stronger, there's still a very high intensity of red and near infrared. So it's just the proportion of the blue and ultraviolet wavelengths changes the most throughout the day because of the way that light interferes with the atmosphere. So when the sun is at a low angle around sunrise or sunset, it's the blue and ultraviolet, all of the light has to pass through a lot more atmosphere. And short wavelength light, it's called Rayleigh scattering, is this principle where short wavelength light, like blue and ultraviolet, is scattered more than longer wavelength light, such as red, yellow, and orange. So sunrises appear, more reddish or orange for this reason, because the shorter wavelengths are being filtered out. And that's the same reason why the sky is blue, because blue light, the visible color blue, is scattered more than longer wavelengths. So the sky appears blue and the sun appears a little more yellowish, even though the sun in reality, just like all other stars, is more white if you actually saw it from space. But because of the atmospheric filtration, Rayleigh scattering, the sky then becomes blue and the sun appears slightly more kind of yellow golden, right? The higher the angle of the sun, the more white it appears. The lower the angle, the more yellow or even orange or even red it appears if there's a lot of moisture in the atmosphere. So
makes sense.
So basically, when the sun is rising and setting, there's far more red and near infrared light, proportionately speaking. And so it does make a lot of sense to have red light therapy around these times, because it is a kind of trigger, a signal that the sun is either rising or setting. So it's always present in the kind of margin periods between day and night. So red light therapy can be especially advisable at these times, but generally throughout the day, there's no time when it is unadvisable. I would say at night is the one time you would probably not want to use red light therapy, because
Mm-hmm.
it's also shown that just like blue light can affect the circadian rhythm, it's not just the wavelengths of light that affect the biological clock, but also the overall intensity of the light. So if you have really bright light, even if it's not blue light, even if it's red, it can and will still have an effect on the circadian system. So I wouldn't do high intensity red light therapy in the evening, like after sunset,
Mm-hmm.
but that's different from just near infrared. So you can turn your red light therapy panel typically to near infrared only. So there's no visible bright red light, but you could still get the healing cellular benefits of near infrared light and also energy production benefits. Or for example, if you have a sauna, you can do a sauna also in the evening. I personally wouldn't do a sauna like right before bed, just because for some people that intense heat can actually be a bit stressful. So it is biologically a bit stressful to get into, a 200 Fahrenheit sauna. So right before bed might not be advisable, but some people do sauna right before bed and they love it, right? So to
Yeah.
each their own. And especially if you're coupling it with ice baths, right? Like you're going to spike your cortisol. So maybe, an hour before bed. But I wouldn't say there's a time when you shouldn't do red light therapy other than in the night when you're trying to get ready for sleep.
Got you. That's why when you have red light, because some individuals have asked me like when to do a sauna or red light therapy, morning or night. And the importance though of the glasses and the blocking of blue light. So you're talking about the blue light being scattered in the atmosphere. We want red light because it does turn on our cells, but what is the deficits that blue light bring to the body? Or I'm not saying that blue light all in itself is bad, but is there a major biological effect that we need to be aware of? That's why we use your glasses, because I use them, and I'm telling you, I will say this, and to brag on your products, I can get up in the morning and I can be a little bit just moving too quickly and I can feel it in my body, and I will put these on and my parasympathetics, like I'll start to calm down really well, and I can literally tell in a few seconds. And I try my best to stay away from blue light, but could you go over that as well for people listening, like the effects of blue light and the sources?
Yeah. So blue light is the range of light that has a few effects, but we typically speak about blue light when we speak about the circadian rhythm. So the body's biological clock, which basically synchronizes our internal functions with the regular changes in the external environment. Namely the change from day to night and night to day, which is the most significant regular change in our environment. And organisms that can adapt to changes in their environment have higher survivability, especially over long periods of time. So, you have to be able to adapt when you're chased by a lion or something, right? So we need to save energy for things that you can't really predict. So it makes sense to develop unconscious systems to adapt to the things that you can predict, so that you don't have to expend energy, which we have limited amounts of, in order to adjust. If we had to just every time it went from night to day to sit and really focus on, okay, now I'm going to, release cortisol so that I can be more active, and I'm going to, start secreting more melanin into my cells to build a tan to protect myself from sun, and I'm going to increase my, if we had to consciously do all of that stuff, we would, and then some, animal came and chased us, we'd be distracted, right? Just for it to really oversimplify, right? But basically for this reason, the body has built a lot of systems to adjust to these regular changes in the environment. Again, the change between night and day is one of the most significant, but then there are also changes throughout the moon cycle, the seasons, summer, winter, etc. So blue light is the primary driver of our circadian rhythm for a reason that I found really interesting, which our scientific advisor explained to me in more detail than anybody else ever had. I always previously thought that it was just because blue light, it changes a lot from day to night and throughout the day as well. So from sunrise, due to this scattering effect, blue light, the content of blue light changes more than the content of any other visible wavelength of light in the sun. So from sunrise to midday, there's a huge change in blue. There's an even greater change in the content of ultraviolet, but we don't see that. But anyway, So I thought, okay, the organism just selected blue light for that reason, just kind of made sense. But the way my scientific advisor explained it with a much deeper, decades of knowledge of this information, and I'm very blessed to be able to learn from such an expert, is that ultraviolet light is the primary threat for living cells and living systems. So although the sun powers our cells and gives us energy to exist, nothing is necessarily ever all good or all bad, right? The sun can be our power source, but if you were released, for example, into the desert at high noon in the summer, you wouldn't really like it. In fact, you wouldn't make it very long, right? Well, you die of thirst, you die of heat stroke, you probably die of just heat stroke before anything else. But excess sun exposure on the skin causes sunburn. Obviously, it's excess of reactive oxygen species production in the cells. Our cells don't like ultraviolet light in excess. Again, little bits for vitamin D production and so on, great. But beyond a certain point, our cells can't deal with it. All the systems of building a tan, thickening of the skin, all of these happen in the transition from winter to spring and into summer as the sun gets stronger and stronger. These are all designed to protect, keyword being protect, from ultraviolet light. So in the morning, as the sun, which is this great power source, but also stressor, kind of a threat to our cells, comes up, ultraviolet levels are increasing rapidly. And so the interesting thing is that blue light always increases before ultraviolet levels do. And so it makes sense that cells would look at blue light as the precursor to the onset of ultraviolet light, which inevitably follows the increase in blue light. The other reason is that any receptor that we have in our body, if it has to absorb certain light, that light has energy, and the energy over time, and this is what ultraviolet does in particular, ultraviolet has a lot of power and it breaks apart molecules. So for example, if you leave a nice painting out in the sun, it won't be a very nice painting after very long. Or for example, if you have windows that don't filter ultraviolet light and you have a couch next to the window, the color of the couch will fade over time. Right. So ultraviolet light, because it has so much energy, it causes molecules such as pigments to degrade, which is why, and pigments are proteins. So they will degrade. And the same thing can happen in our biology. That's why we attempt to protect. So basically, the receptors that have to store ultraviolet light, if we used ultraviolet as the sensor, the receptors would have to hold that ultraviolet light energy and dissipate it, and they would degrade faster. Here's the best example. One time I was driving down the street in Germany with Dr. Wunsch, our scientific advisor here, and he said to me, he had an experiment. He said, "Do you notice anything about the street signs?" And I thought, I don't. I really don't know. It was 5 minutes passed by. I had nothing. And he said, "Do you see the red and the blue?" And I thought, okay, interesting. I still didn't really notice a huge difference. But then it hit me. I started to realize that the red street signs were typically more faded than the blue street signs. And so I mentioned this and he said, yes, but why? Thought about it. And again, I was at a loss. And so if you have a blue street sign, what it means is that it's absorbing the light, all of the light wavelengths, but it is re-emitting blue, the shorter wavelengths, and basically keeping the red and longer wavelengths of light. Right. And if you have red, it's the opposite. It's holding the blue light and releasing everything else back into the environment, which is why we see it as red. And so red street signs, and for example, any red on an American flag always fades way faster than the blue because the red pigments are absorbing and storing the blue light energy, which has a ton more energy. And so because blue light has more energy, and these pigments are designed to hold it, they degrade much faster. So the point is, if we had a ultraviolet light sensor or ultraviolet light pigment, it would degrade faster. So two main reasons why our body uses blue to set the rhythm. One, it's a precursor to ultraviolet, so it's like a warning. And two, because any sensor that has to store ultraviolet will, by definition, degrade a lot faster because of the power of ultraviolet light that it would have to hold on to. So anyway, that's the actual basics of, or the not basics, but the science, the foundation of why our body uses blue light as a sensor for changes in the environment, this change from day to night. Now, what does that actually do for us? I know that's a lot of scientific lingo that maybe
No, I like
people
it. I love
hard
this.
to follow. I want to try to explain
I
it.
love it.
Yeah, as well as I can for people to really understand. So it's a huge shift. It's basically there's a switch in our brain, and the switch can basically be in just two positions. One is stress and activity, and the other is relaxation and regeneration and cellular repair. And so it's basically just a biphasic system. There are two choices. That's it. So basically, when we have exposure to blue light, especially from the sun, but artificial sources do this too. And that gets us to maybe the next topic, which is really interesting, which is how artificial lights can affect us negatively. But basically, when we have blue light, it activates the stress side of this system by basically signaling to our brain that it's daytime and it's time to wake up. And this happens through a specific cell in our eye that scientists discovered called intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells, a pigment in the cells called melanopsin, which absorbs a peak of blue light around 480 nanometers. That signal travels across the retinal hypothalamic tract, which is basically between the eye, the retina, and the hypothalamus in the brain. And it goes directly to this region of the hypothalamus called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is considered the master clock of the brain. And this controls, it's not just the brain, but the whole body. And so then there are further effects from there into other parts of the brain. But basically, it tells the brain it's daytime, right? We got that. And it stimulates the production of ACTH, which causes the body to produce then cortisol and also adrenaline, noradrenaline, and so on. So these hormones that wake us up, right? So that's the one side of the switch. The other side of the switch is when the blue light goes away, the brain stops releasing cortisol and stress hormones, and after some time starts to secrete melatonin. And melatonin reduces mitochondrial energy production and eventually leads us to go to sleep. Because when you reduce mitochondrial energy production, you get tired and then you fall asleep, and melatonin works its magic on cellular repair. So blue light has a very significant impact on our biology by basically flipping the switch between activity and stress and function, which is stress, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but we need stress to be alive and awake and active. If we didn't have any stress hormones, you wouldn't be able to wake up and move and do things. So it flips the switch between stress and repair and regeneration. And we need this. Now, one big problem with blue light, and this is what I started to learn as I was researching this for my own personal health journey, especially from modern artificial sources, is that it doesn't exactly affect us in the same way as outdoor light. Or maybe said better, it does affect us kind of in the same way as sun. But when it's the middle of the day in nature, people seek shade typically, unless you're a tourist. Tourists and vacationers go lay on the beach in the sun. But local people, for example, on the Mediterranean here in Europe, they have a siesta. When the sun is the strongest, they're not out in the hot sun laying on the beach. Typically, culturally, we've evolved ways to keep ourselves protected from the most threatening wavelengths and ranges of light, which is, again, the ultraviolet and short wavelength blue light, which is strongest in the middle of the day at high noon. So people actually seek shade, and animals seek shade at that time, not just because it's hot, but also particularly because of the effects of this light. You'll get sunburn. Now, people can use sunscreen, and so on to try to circumvent this, but this really isn't ideal. It's like the light is causing a problem. Just because you put a sunscreen on doesn't mean you're necessarily resolving the problem. And that's a whole separate conversation, because ultraviolet light causes the chemicals in the sunscreen to degrade, and many of these are carcinogenic or become carcinogenic after this exposure. Also, sunscreen prevents the body from developing its own natural resilience, which is a huge problem, because then you could go all the way from winter to midsummer and never build up a tan, and then you thereby actually increase your risk of the kind of skin damage which could lead to aging or even cancerous cell development over time.
Wow.
So this is not good, right? But artificial light, interestingly enough, especially with this new concept of human-centric lighting, which isn't human-centric at all, and this is buyer beware. This is a big issue we have in the lighting industry right now, is they're trying to artificially stimulate that noontime sun with artificial lights and stimulate the hormonal effects of that. So, for example, an office might say, hey, if we put in this, 6,000 Kelvin color temperature, which is cold, white, noontime like sun, our workers will be more productive because it'll increase their stress hormones. Well, there's two issues there. One, should workers really be subject to basically biological experiments in their office? Probably not. Anything that has a medical effect, as a doctor, anything that has a medical effect should be subject to, lots of research, warnings, disclaimers, contraindications, and everything. And human-centric lighting, interestingly enough, is not, even though it has a very significant impact on a very foundational system in our body, the production of stress hormones and other many downstream effects. But for example, what if somebody has high blood pressure? What if somebody's overstressed? Human-centric lighting is actually increasing their stress levels, increasing potentially something very problematic, which maybe some people can manage it and tolerate it. Maybe some people will even benefit from the increase in stress hormone production. They'll maybe will be more productive. But most people today are overstressed and have diseases related to stress. And, many people have high blood pressure and so on. So it's a really bad idea. But so basically what's happening in the lighting industry, this trend, which is the wrong trend and has nothing to do with healthy lighting, of human-centric lighting, as they call it, is are unnaturally jacking up stress hormone levels using noontime-like sun in a workplace. The second big risk, besides the hormonal risk, is that these lights the industry is completely unaware, or they're aware, but they're not doing anything about it, of the risks of HEVL, which is high energy visible light. So that's one major risk, is the effects of artificial light trying to unnaturally jack up our hormonal system and stress hormone production. The other big risk is that these lights also emit large quantities of what's called high energy visible light, or HEVL, which is basically blue light below 450 nanometers. And this blue light, we could call it short wavelength blue light. So blue goes from around 400 to 500. So short wavelength blue would be around 450 nanometers or below. And this short wavelength blue light has actually the power to cause chemical damage to cells, just like ultraviolet light. It's not quite as powerful as ultraviolet, so it doesn't act quite as quickly, but over time it will. So for example, if you're an animal in nature, you're not going to stay in the sun for 12 hours a day or even 8 hours a day direct. All traditional cultures, the hats that rice farmers wear, huge hats. All traditional cultures try to protect themselves from sunlight, from excess exposure, right? They do everything they can. Inuits created sunglasses made of bones with small slits to prevent snow blindness, for example.
Wow.
So traditional cultures would protect themselves from excess sunlight exposure, right? But yet, why do we think it's okay to expose ourselves to this short wavelength blue light for 8 to 10 hours a day or more in our offices and our homes, this is exactly what we're doing now. So basically, the other risk of blue light, besides the hormonal overstimulation or disruption, essentially, is overstimulation is the best term, is the chemical damage caused by short wavelength blue light. So long wavelength blue light above 450 nanometers affects the hormonal system and the body's circadian rhythm and stress hormone production. But short wavelength blue light below 450, close to ultraviolet, has the capacity to actually it causes an increase in reactive oxygen species production in cells, just like ultraviolet light does. So not only are we disrupting our hormones, this indoor blue light is actually causing cellular damage, which again, in nature, outdoors, we avoid excess sun to avoid these effects. But when you're in an office under blue enriched light all day, you're actually kind of unable to avoid it unless you maybe covered your face and use some kind of special cream, which we should probably invent, or blue light protection glasses. So blue light can be very good because it's essential for regulating the body's healthy, natural circadian rhythm. And we're actually we are launching really soon a new type of lens, which allows people to increase the proportion of long wavelength blue light that stimulates the body's hormonal system. But you would typically use this product for short periods of time. I'll actually show it to you.
Wow.
It's a new lens. I don't know when this is going to launch, but this is a new lens we're releasing. This frame is not a frame we're releasing, but this is it's a bluish lens that you use in the morning and throughout the day, and it strengthens the body's circadian rhythm. We're probably launching this here in about 3 weeks. And it selectively amplifies the long wavelength blue light that activates the body's circadian rhythm. But the difference is you might put this on for 20 or 30 minutes, or if you're outside, you might use it for a longer period of time, but you're not forced to be exposed to more blue light by your employer for the whole day. And the other thing is that while this lens increases the proportion of circadian stimulating, hormonally active blue light, it actually decreases. It's specifically designed to cut out the short wavelength blue light that causes physical damage or chemical damage to cells.
Wow.
Whereas the artificial lights still have a lot of that. So it's like more of the, let's call it good blue light, the blue light that's good in the morning. You wouldn't want this at night unless you want to perform because you're a tennis player and you play at 10 p.m. But it cuts out the short wavelength blue light, which causes cellular damage directly to cells. Like we're talking, when we say cellular damage, we're saying basically just like ultraviolet light, this light has enough power to break apart molecules, and it does. It disrupts energy production, and it causes cells to make more reactive oxygen species, which are really bad. If you have too much of that constantly, it's a real problem. So super deep dive, long-winded answer. That's how blue light affects our body and why too much could be bad, and how at the right time, it's really good because you need it to activate your body's rhythm. And that's what this lens technology will do.
When will those be out though? You said later this year they'll be out?
Actually in about 3 weeks.
Wow. Because so somebody that's in blue light, like all day, they're in the office, like you said, they're consistently stimulating reactive oxygen species, like basically cellular rusting in some ways. Yeah. And then you say the longer wavelength of blue could actually be overstimulating their hormonal system. So it could be valid to say that some people could have hormonal disruption and actually have higher oxidants like running around their system, higher inflammation because they're in that light all day.
Yeah, I would say I would just change two words. One is that not could be. I would say can or will be. And not some people, but all people. So basically, it affects everyone. The question is just how healthy and balanced or resilient is someone, and can they withstand the kind of constant stimulation of their hormonal system? Like maybe somebody who's a bit younger or somebody who's more fit and more robust could withstand the stress more than somebody who's obese or has other issues. Underlying conditions or whatever, high blood pressure again, and so on. These people will be far more affected because they're already kind of at the edge with their health. They'll be far more affected by the chronic overstimulation of the hormonal system by this blue light. And it's important for me to add and disclaim that the sun has, intensity-wise, a generally a much higher amount of blue light. But the way the body reacts on a proportional basis, right? So the sensors, for example, the pupil adjusts, the sensors in our eye, the amount of pigment adjusts between nighttime and daytime. So at night, the eye fills itself with a lot more pigment in order to be able to sense light in low light conditions. So we have the pupils adjustment, which happens quickly for rapid changes in light intensity, but there's a chemical adaptation in the eyes that happens between day and night and day again. So the way our cells, they adjust to the overall intensity. So the way the cells in the body are reacting is to the relative levels of different lights of the light. So even if people could say, oh, well, the artificial lights have significantly less blue light overall compared to the sun, so they're not going to have the same effect. That's not really true. One, because from the hormonal standpoint, we're sensing the light on more of a relative basis. And so if you have this blue enriched light, it's still going to trigger this big, hormonal release. And that's also why this blue lens actually can work for people who want an extra kick and stimulus, because it actually decreases the overall amount of light, including blue light, and especially the more damaging light. But on a proportional basis, it's selectively increasing the blue light directly that activates the body's rhythm. So it's very useful, for example, in morning hours to help strengthen the circadian rhythm.
But then that's cool because...
Just the other issue is that it's also that we're, as I said earlier, we're exposed to it for like 10, 14 hours a day. People have the exposure doesn't stop and it's direct.
Yep. That's exact. If it's happening all the time, let's say you and I in an office and you want that extra oomph, like you have the new glasses, or somebody's like, I want some repair to my hormonal system. They're in a office where there's light. Does wearing the glasses have a stronger effect on their neurology than the light would be if it was just coming, hitting them on the skin or on the head? I mean, would it I hope that makes sense. Like you have, because you're in an environment where there's like some damaging blue light, but you put these on the eyes, and so you're not perceiving it through your eyes, and it's helping that. Is that, I know it's beneficial, but is that stronger to the nervous system, even though they're getting hit on the skin or on the head from the blue light?
Yeah. I'm glad you asked. Actually, the skin the skin is still an issue. And that's something we're also thinking about. How can we support, again, maybe somebody needs to invent a cream. I think there are already some products like this, blue light protective creams. But then you get into creams. Cool. Yeah. There are, they're not super popular as far as I know. Maybe they should be. But you get into creams and you want to look like, okay, is it full of seed oils and petroleum and so on? You'd want it to be something really clean. But yeah, it's an interesting concept for sure. But yes, the eye is the primary sensor for the hormonal system. So, this is not the best example, but we see through our eyes. We don't really see through our skin exactly. It doesn't mean light doesn't have an effect on the skin, but the eye is so much more sensitive to the light. And it is what wires directly to the hormonal system. So the chemical effects are profound on the skin. And there is decent research that there is also some kind of hormonal effect from skin. In other words, light even shown on the back of the kneecap can affect the circadian rhythm, which I thought was really fascinating. But the effect is much more pronounced through the eyes. And we know from the research on light going through the eyes and then the effects of our glasses, which are, based on the research. I actually intend to do more studies on our glasses in the future, or just studies, period. There are some very strong studies on blue light protection glasses. So just starting there are studies showing that blue light protection glasses work very well, but only the ones with color. The color means there's a pigment which is absorbing light. Now, we tailor our pigments through a lot of very, very tedious work to ensure that they're basically perfect for a few criteria, one being blue light protection, another being the color perception and visual experience, and the third being the hue. So the hue being the color you see. And that also, from the science of color and light, has a profound impact on our physiology, the way we feel, just like, a rose makes you feel different than other colored flowers and so on. So, and that is not just psychological, as people often think. There is a physiological basis for the way that colors make us feel. But so basically, there are studies showing that blue light protection glasses with color have very powerful impacts on, for example, increasing melatonin release and improving sleep. We know from many, many customers who use Oura rings and Whoop bracelets that their deep sleep and even REM sleep and HRV measurements all improve when they start using our products. Even our daylight lenses, which are kind of our level 1 blue light protection. Level 2 is our sunset, which is the more orange, reddish protection. So basically, what was interesting is there was a Cochrane review last year on blue light protection glasses, which basically concluded that blue light protection glasses do not have a significant impact on health or on sleep and so on. But the issue is that the vast majority of the products that were included in the review were clear lens blue light blocking glasses, which have zero effect on the hormonal system because they don't even block any light in the range that affects the hormonal system. So they couldn't possibly affect sleep and melatonin release and so on. But they also barely even block 10%, generally less, of the short wavelength blue light, which causes physical damage to the eyes. So the clear lens, the colorless blue light protection glasses are effectively worthless. Fortunately, there are a few solid companies like mine, Raw Optics, other companies as well, making the colored lens blue blocking glasses, which are much more, they work, period, compared to the ones that don't. But the interesting thing in this, kind of meta-analysis review done by this supposedly reputable scientific group, Cochrane, was that they completely failed to basically distinguish between colorless blue light protection and colored blue light protection. So we know based on the science that the colored lens glasses do, if they're designed to block the right wavelengths, not all of them are, they do have a strong effect on the hormonal system as well as eye protection, physical eye protection. But no, they won't protect the skin, which is something we consider. Honestly, the best protection is a hat. Like I use a hat a lot of the time for additional protection, especially if I have a lot of overhead lights. I find a baseball cap to be very useful. And we're actually make our own Raw Optics baseball caps now, not for blue light protection purposes, but just for cool purposes. So maybe we can tell them for blue light protection as well.
No, I mean, this is what, like, I love this. I mean, because if you like just the small things that you could do, like you say, add a hat in or use the colored lenses. When I was asking, one of my patients had asked me about them because I wear them all the time, brother. And they were asking what would be like the signs and symptoms, like if I'm struggling with circadian rhythm, like, or, if somebody comes to you and say like, is there small signs that you would think, I know it's for overall health, you should do it because we're in a world of like blue light and we're in front of tablets, we're in front of, your iPad and your computer. But are there small telltale signs and symptoms like circadian rhythm dysfunction that people should sort of keep an eye out for, like a couple basic ones?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the best way to explain this is my own revelation when I was recommended by a guy who's a customer of ours, who founded one of the top 5 big tech companies. And he was telling me about how he thought I could improve our marketing and help the products reach more people. And a big point was actually focusing less on the science and focusing on just how it makes you feel and that. But anyway, he recommended a book to me which spoke about a very interesting concept for product innovation and marketing in general, called jobs theory. And it talks about how basically the book's called Competing Against Luck for the studious among us here, who people who like to read books. But anyway, it talks about this theory called jobs theory. And I'm kind of revealing my secrets, guys, just so you know. But basically,
I love it.
So jobs theory basically says that people don't buy products just for any reason. And people really hire products to solve a particular problem or do a particular function, just like you'd hire a plumber for a very specific task, right? The reasons why people could hire a product or a milkshake or a meal or everything are totally different. And everybody might have different reasons for the same product. But you have to understand your customers and you have to understand what their jobs to be done are. And basically one of the things that this author, a few authors who wrote this book, shared in the book was, when you understand jobs theory, you might realize that your competition isn't who you thought it was, right? So in the book's title is Competing Against Luck. More generally, it's how can you reliably predict innovation as a company or innovate predictably. So what I realized is that my company, Raw Optics, and the blue light protection glasses we're making, both our daylight lenses and sunset lenses, our main competition, this was very freeing, isn't, the guys down the street, so to speak, on the internet who are making similar blue light protection glasses, who pretty much all of them just copied us. They just followed what we did, which is a huge compliment, including someone who's the most famous public scientist now in the world recently released their own line of these products, I'm very happy about this because I know where the inspiration came from. I'll just put it that way. So basically, but I realized that for our daylight lenses, when we're protecting from artificial light during the day and its disruptive effects, and this is to your question about the symptoms of circadian rhythm disruption or general hormonal disruption or artificial light's negative effects. During the day, one of the main effects of artificial light in an office, for example, or school or a mall would be dry eyes, eye strain, headaches, fatigue. So what is our competition in this case? Well, dry eyes, we're competing against eye drops or just people accepting that their eyes are too dry. We're competing against people having eye strain and pain in their eyes and taking Advil because they get a headache. So Advil's a pretty big competition, pretty good competition to have when you have a solution for, a multi-billion-dollar ibuprofen product market. And fatigue, coffee. Coffee is one of our biggest competitors. So I think caffeine dependent. So if you need eye drops or you need Advil regularly or you need coffee, I'm not telling anybody they shouldn't take their medication. Take your medication. This is not medical advice. I'm just sharing scientific research. But if you experience caffeine dependence, circadian rhythm disruption, and that's basically like 90% of people in the Western world, maybe more. I would say out of people I know, 9 in 10 probably depend on caffeine. And everybody says it's because they like the ritual and they like the smell and they love the experience and it's just so great. But that's what drug addicts say about their drugs, basically. Yeah. I'm just being honest, right? I
Yeah,
like
no,
coffee
I get it.
sometimes too, but when I drink coffee, I usually get heart palpitations and very anxious. So I usually regret that I drank it. But anyway, so caffeine dependence would be a very clear signal of circadian rhythm disruption. And then on the sunset lens side of the equation, I realized that what do our sunset lenses do? Well, they help people relax naturally in the evening to wind down. So basically, they do this by blocking the light, which is unnaturally waking us up. First thing I think about are kids. Are your kids hyperactive in the evening? Many people's kids are. I have friends who had all their lights on all the time, and then we met and they started just using candles, and it was easier for their kids to go to sleep. Why? Because they turned off the drugs that were stimulating their kids to stay awake, aka artificial light. So they just stopped cranking the supply of ACTH in the evening, and then, it was a little bit easier. It doesn't mean kids are always going to be easy. I don't have kids, so, I commend all the parents out there, right? Because I don't know what that's like yet. But anyway, one day we'll get there. So anyway, winding down naturally. So, one, it can save you a headache from hyperactivity, both in your kids and yourself. What do people use to take the edge off in the evening to wind down naturally? Alcohol. Big one. Wine, exactly. So you need, if somebody needs a lot of wine or alcohol to take the edge off and wind down, it could be two things. One, they're overstressed all day long. They're in an office pumping out cortisol all day long under the human-centric lighting. Big lie. Big lie. It's not human-centric at all. But it's employer-centric. I'm not a communist, but it's like it's not for the workers. It's for the anyway. So basically, people. So one, they have overstimulation all day long, and so they need to take the edge off that way. And then two, the overstimulation continues into the evening under low quality lighting, and so basically they have to use alcohol or cannabis. Another big one, big business. So it's kind of like we're taking, we're threatening the cartel's business. I'll just put it that way. Let's see how that goes. And then, maybe I should hire a security detail. I don't know. But anyway, seriously, this is real stuff. So you block the blue light, you turn off the ACTH and the stress switch, you switch it to repair by blocking blue light with our sunset lenses in the evening, and you really start to wind down, relax naturally. People fall asleep more easily. So sleeping pills, big one, right? Sleeping pills, a lot of people are addicted. We've had people who are addicted to melatonin and sleeping pills get off of them with our glasses. We have testimonials of that. Pretty amazing. We had a child who's became fully addicted, like a 6 or 7 year old child who became fully addicted to melatonin because when COVID came out, they were deathly afraid that their child who had, I believe, childhood cancer or some other serious illness was predisposed to COVID. They were terrified. They saw one study or one article that melatonin could potentially be protective against COVID. So they started dosing their kid up with melatonin. The kid became addicted to melatonin. The kid couldn't get off of melatonin. They had to keep increasing the dose in order for the kid to be able to sleep at all. And raw optics helped the kid get off of their melatonin addiction. So for me, that's a pretty touching story. Yeah. So it really works. And then it was falling asleep easily. So sleeping deeply. I think when it comes to sleep, again, you're competing against sleeping pills and melatonin and other things people use. But I think one of our biggest competitions is people just accepting low quality sleep. And then the next day when they slept poorly, they're accepting fatigue. And then they're just dosing up again with coffee. So it's basically you need alcohol to wind down because you have too much stimulation in the evening, and you need coffee to wind up because your sleep was disrupted because the rhythm's disrupted. So finally, long-term, chronic overstimulation of stress, we know causes every disease. Basically, that's also a foundational finding in research now is that most diseases today are linked by stress. And stress increases the risk at the very least of most diseases, maybe even all. It decreases immune function. Because when you're stressed, stress, chemically speaking, biologically speaking, is the need to protect against the outer environment. So the sun comes up, there's activity, you need to be able to move and do things externally. And the immune system is depressed at that time. When the immune system's active, it's using energy for internal protection, right? So you don't need to run from a lion, you need to kill all the germs inside. So when we're exhausted, we don't have any energy to do stuff because all the energy is being used internally. So anyway, stress increases the risk of diseases. And so we're competing against all diseases. So it's I guess this is a very long-winded answer, but it's like chronic circadian rhythm dysfunction could manifest as all modern chronic illnesses today. It's definitely, I wouldn't say it's the only factor. It's definitely a huge contributor today to modern chronic illnesses, among many, many other stressors and toxins and so on that we're exposed to. So our products offer a simple solution for that. But I have since the beginning, that's how I got into this actually, is teaching and advocating for healthy circadian rhythm practices. The reason I started making these products, do you know Luke Story, the podcaster?
I don't know him, but I've heard his podcast.
Okay,
Yeah.
Great guy. And I when I was 17, I heard his podcast. I had studied all this stuff for years. I was obsessed. I thought I knew all the answers to everybody's problems because that's what you think when you're 17 and you studied, you read a few books. But I went to ask him if I could go on his podcast and share this information I had learned that was really inspiring for me and had helped me over those years with my own issues. And it was that desire that I had just purely to share the information, right? Share the science I had learned about, which I ended up doing. And it was a really successful podcast. And that same night when I asked if I could go on his podcast, because he was doing some event that I went to and said hello, he asked, hey, where'd you get those cool blue blocking glasses made? I heard I should wear them, but they're all ugly. They're all these safety goggles, or they're the clear ones that don't work. And that's actually how my company started. So my point of saying that is that I'm not out here just trying to hawk my products. Like the products came as a derivative of wanting to spread the information. And then it was like, I think God, the universe kind of said, you have to deliver the solution to people as well. The information is not enough. You got to give people a solution. So I hope I answered your question. It's a long-winded answer. Lots for people.
No, I think the way you posted it, brother, as in like the science of light, I like it when you went in detail because, there are times when patients will say, well, they love the glasses. They think they look cool. They really do. They go, man, those look really cool. I want to get a pair. And then I can't explain it at all like you can. But to show the science behind, like it actually does change. It can change hormonal balance, and it can change different things in your body. So to me, this is a new wave that I'm thankful that you become the person to move forward in the area of science of light and light therapy. And I truly mean that because when you put it articulately, when you said like dry eyes mean that you need Visine, painful eyes need you're working against Advil. Really, man, that's like, I wrote those things down because that really makes a good amount of sense because if you're tired of having those things, then it could be that you really are in front of a blue light. I've had individuals, and I know you have too, my friend, where they'll come in and they'll say like, I've got a headache, I got neck pain, and they'll go through the list. And truly, like I'll go through their history and then they're telling me that they're in front of like TV or in front of, some form of light, and they'll be there for almost 14 hours a day. And I'm like, well, I think honestly, you don't really have to pay me any more money. I think you need to try to do some light therapy. And I would have to say out of all the people, if it was like 10 people, I would say 7 to 8 are pretty much doing pretty well just by giving them to change their light. Now, with this though, I want people. I know you're not here. You don't have that vibe, brother. To like hawk, you say a product. To me, it's like you love it. That's why I like it when you go into all the science because people hear it. Now, I want this. I know I'm really cautious about your time, and I'm always thankful that you take your time out for me.
As long as my internet's functioning, we're good.
That's good, man. I just want to say, like, what about so the light diet, though? I want to hear about the light diet. Some people were asking me about that to ask you. So can you touch a bit
of course. I'm glad to share. So the light diet is the next wave of health and a bit neglected by me right now because I'm super busy with the company, to be honest. That's the first explanation. The light diet is a simple protocol that anyone can use to improve their health with the science of light. And the light diet is a concept of a way to live that is more in harmony with nature, the natural environment, the way we evolved, and so on. Food is a very, very small part of it. Eat healthy, eat locally, eat seasonally. That's really the extent of the food part of the light diet. The rest is about light and how we interact with light as organisms and how it affects our health. Raw optics, the blue light protection glasses, is kind of the first physical manifestation of the light diet in a product, in a company. We have kind of similarly 2 more companies on the way. Really, they'll all go under the Raw brand, but different types of products in the field of light therapy. So think a product you're shining on yourself for desired biological effects, specifically red light therapy. We've been working on an amazing product literally for 3 years, me with the top scientific expert in the world in this field, Dr. Wunsch, who I'd love to introduce for a podcast as well, because you guys can top it up. He's amazing. He can go, if you think I can go deep, he can go 10 times deeper. So like I'm just on the crust. He's down at the mantle, the core.
Oh, man, that's good to go down.
But I've learned a lot from him, right? So anyway, light therapy and then general lighting. So in order to really fix the issue, the root issue of the problems of light, we need to, one, get people out in nature and exposing themselves to the only light source which is qualified to modulate our body's rhythms, period. It's sun. We don't want to use artificial light to do this. It is a bad idea overall for the reasons I described earlier. It's stagnant. It doesn't change throughout the day. Everybody's different. Everybody has different requirements. When you're out in nature, some people will want to stay in the sun. Some people will feel the call to go in the shade. So anyway, so we want to get people out in nature to get morning sunlight. And I commend Dr. Andrew Huberman, who's done an amazing job, I think better than anybody else at this point, pushing this science out to the masses. Although there are many other geniuses in the last decades who have push this science forward, like Dr. Alexander Wunsch, like Dr. Jack Kruse, who many people know, who have taught this science and brought it out so that a guy like Huberman and the bigger names, Dave Asprey, Ben Greenfield, would then push it out further. So anyway, morning sunlight, evening sunlight, those are two key parts of the light diet. So basically we have, as a company, we have blue light protection glasses. We have light therapy products, which you can use light in very specific ways to very specifically activate certain biological functions, right? You can use pulsation and frequency to cause water molecules to move in a certain desirable way in the capillaries, for example, because, at the close to the heart, there's a lot of pressure when the heart pumps, but out in the capillaries, that's where the most nutrient exchange and everything is occurring for cells. And that's where the least pressure is from the blood standpoint to get things moving. But we want water moving and nutrients moving in order to be able to exchange effectively across membranes. We can use light therapy. This is one of the ways pulsed light therapy works, is it actually stimulates the movement of molecules in water to basically increase the cellular activity, especially at the peripheries far away from the heart where the push is coming for blood. So anyway, light therapy is very powerful, and that's a huge world we're going to be uncovering. And then general lighting, as I alluded to earlier, we can create high quality light, which is hormonally neutral. So our belief is that lighting should be hormonally neutral. It shouldn't bring you up. It shouldn't necessarily bring you down. Or it lets the system do its own things. So in the evening, it lets the system release melatonin naturally. In the daytime, it lets the system make as much cortisol as it needs to based on the level of activity. Because the activity, whether it's running around or even answering emails, the activity stimulates enough cortisol production. And it's very important that people do get enough daylight. So that brings me to the light diet. So there are several steps to the light diet, but the most important steps overall are watch the sunrise. So basically get up in the morning and look toward the rising sun for 10 to 15 minutes every day. It doesn't have to be directly at sunrise, but that's when the effects are the strongest because of the way the sensors work in our eye and the way our brain perceives the light. So if you can get up and watch the sunrise every day, that's fantastic. If you wake up after sunrise, go outside 10 to 15 minutes, look in the direction of the sun, not directly at it, unless it's right after sunrise. You could look at it, but otherwise don't. And that will help basically in the correct way activate this hormonal system, the on switch, the stress side of this switch I was speaking about earlier, so that everything in the body can work. Hormones, neurotransmitters, peptides, and so on and so on. Basically everything, because when we're asleep, very, very little is happening. I mean, I should say there's a lot happening, but it's a very different set of functions compared to when we're active. It's not that a lot is happening, but it's a different set of functions. And when we're awake, we want the awake functions to be happening, not the asleep functions. And the way that happens is with the stimulus of artificial light. A lot of people wake up, they never expose themselves to morning sunlight. They don't get the stimulus. They get a kind of bastardized version of the stimulus once they get to work and they're in the office. And then they're really stressed and on edge for all the reasons we discussed earlier. And they never fully wake up. I think most people actually never fully wake up because they never see the sunrise. They're really not awake. And you can take that as far as you'd like to interpret it. But basically, That's how it is. And people need caffeine to kind of artificially, externally stimulate this, but in the way that isn't really the exact most natural way. Anyhow, so watch the sunrise in the morning. Then throughout the day, another really important part of the light diet is to expose ourselves to natural daylight throughout the day. So expose ourselves to unfiltered daylight. So not just getting light in the morning, but throughout the day. I would suggest every 1 to 2 hours getting light for 5 to 10 minutes just to kind of remind the brain that the sun is out and that it's daytime, right? So if you have to be in an artificially lit office, try to get outside. People go outside to smoke. You can go outside to get sun, right? Yeah. Another big step is blocking and filtering or mitigating the risks of artificial light. So if you're inside in an office for many hours, use something like raw optics daylight lenses, maybe a hat, to block or mitigate the risk of these artificial light sources, whether you're at an office or school or a shopping mall or at a big box store or a Costco or whatever. Mitigate the risks of these artificial lights. Another big step of the light diet is eating with the sun, as I call it. So you can go to Ayurvedic medicine. A good friend of mine is a very well-researched, not in the Western research sense, but in the traditional sense, actually did the work, did the study, fully lives and breathes it, Ayurvedic medicine doctor. And I've learned a lot from him. So the universe brought him to me and I've learned so much. And it really, the thing that fascinated me is that so much of what he was teaching me lined up with everything I had read from the Western scientific circadian rhythms and meal timing being a really big focus in Ayurveda. And same in traditional Chinese medicine. So I think it's lung time in Chinese medicine, but it's around noontime, the peak of the sun strength. It's the time when our digestive fire is the strongest. So it makes the most sense to eat our biggest meal then, because we're going to be able to utilize the meal the most, break it down the most, utilize the nutrients the most, and have the least waste products, because there's always waste products and toxins in the metabolic process, but the least occur when the fire is the strongest, or when the fire is the strongest, there's the least smoke. And metabolic smoke is reactive oxygen species, for example. So I like rusting, but rusting slower. So I like the example smoke. So anyway, eating the main meal in noontime is generally advisable. And then eating the least food in the evening, because basically we have melatonin being released, which is actually decreasing mitochondrial activity so that we can sleep. But then if you just ate a meal, well, either you're going to spike you're going to wake yourself up by eating and increase your metabolism, and your cellular repair and regeneration isn't going to be as good when you do go to sleep because you're still kind of digesting. And you're not going to process the meal as well because your metabolic fire, so to speak, isn't as strong as it is in the middle of the day. So there's multiple benefits to eating your main meal at noontime. A lot of people fast. They fast all day and eat their main meal in the evening. They would benefit more from eating their main meal in the middle of the day or even like late morning and then fasting the rest of the day into sleep if you're going to do one meal a day. I don't do this exactly. Personally, I typically have a larger meal around mid to late morning and then a smaller meal around late afternoon. That's kind of what works for me well. But I am considering really shifting to just more like one big meal a day at lunch and going with that. So anyway, eat with the sun. That's the idea. Make your main meal midday and don't eat. If you're going to eat in the late afternoon or evening, avoid the heavier foods. Like if you're going to eat, meat, if somebody's inclined to meat, then, eat that maybe in the middle of the day, not in the evening. If you're a vegetarian and you're going to eat, legumes, better to eat those in the middle of the day because they're harder to digest than let's say cooked vegetables or something. Raw vegetables probably aren't as advisable later in the day either because, again, raw food, according to Chinese medicine and Ayurvedic medicine, takes more energy to digest. So that's the eat with the sun element of the light diet. Then in the evening, we would watch the sunset. So basically watch the sunset. It's what it sounds like. It's not as important for the circadian rhythm as the morning stimulus, but it still has a very positive effect for basically indicating that evening is coming. So watching the sunset or getting some afternoon sun for 10 to 15 minutes late in the afternoon, close to, again, sunset as close as possible, will have a big effect on helping the body to wind down and start releasing melatonin naturally. And then after the sunsets, blocking artificial light. So this is kind of, I would say, part of the same step of the light diet, watching the sunset and then filtering artificial light in the evening using something like the raw optics sunset lenses that block short wavelength light, so blue and green light, which both have a somewhat of a strong, well, blue the most, green a bit less, but a strong effect on our chronobiology, in other words, on our body clock, as distinguished from the yellow lenses, the daylight lenses, which also will benefit melatonin production, but not as profoundly, not as strong. They're more for physical protection and hormonal relief during the day, but they're not going to make you as tired. But they also, because they block less light, they don't distort the color spectrum as much. So you have much better color perception with the yellow lenses during the day. When you put on the red-orange sunset lenses, the color perception goes out the window. But according to my scientific advisor, that's all right, because in the evening, we're not designed to have color perception anyway, because at night it's dark. So the rods don't sense color, high definition colors and rods are designed for low light vision in the evening. They're not designed to sense color. They're designed to sense objects and shapes and things much more than they are high definition color, which is the cones during the day. So anyway, block blue light in the evening. And then what else do we have? Let's see. Those are the most important steps. The most, actually, in my opinion, the most important step of all. Those are the most important from a physical perspective, materialist perspective. But my favorite step is what I call cultivating our inner light. So after years of doing all this like biohacking stuff and actually starting a company and traveling the world, and this is my personal experience, but I was pretty miserable. I'm not going to lie. When I was like 20, 21, I'm 25 now, but I started my company when I was 18. And by the time I was 20, 21, I had traveled the world 3 years over, been to Europe and Bali and Costa Rica and Mexico and many different places, and lived in these places for several months and so on, and was out of the States much more than in the States where I'm originally from. And I had the dream life on paper. People would say to me like, oh man, like, so you're living the dream. And I was like, I guess, but it didn't really feel like it inside. And at that time, it really forced me to dive deeper. I realized that my model must not have been fully complete, because if my model of biology and health and everything was complete, then theoretically I should be happy too. My idea was, as many biohackers have it today, that if I, optimized my morning sunlight and all these other things, and ice baths and meal timing and coffee, not closer than 90 minutes after you wake up, and all the things people do today, that my dopamine would be optimized and my everything would be optimized, that I would be happy, right? That was my premise. And reality didn't exactly confirm my hypothesis that I had. In the end, I was traveling the world, making money, freedom to do what I wanted to do. And I just didn't really feel the way I wanted to feel, like inside fundamentally. Yeah, maybe physically I had recovered, physically looked a lot better than I had the years before when I was, younger and scrawny and pale and really struggling with those different health issues I mentioned earlier. But I didn't feel the way I wanted to feel. And I thought, okay, to me, it seemed pretty clear. The answer had to be something more psychological, maybe even spiritual, because all the physical things weren't working. The interventions weren't making me happy and feel whole. So I came across, I was reading the work of a few different meditation teachers and different experts. I dove into the work of one in particular, Dr. Joe Dispenza, who you're probably familiar with. And it really opened my mind and I like his work very much. And he tries to, really focus on science and scientific evidence, which I think is pretty important, especially for today, when that's what people understand. Science is basically just the religion of the 21st century. For most people, it's like back then people, quote unquote, blindly believed in religion. And now people, for the most part, unfortunately, blindly believe in scientists and science. Exactly. And they still can't explain why things are the way they are at the deepest level. Like, science hasn't unified the four fundamental forces. It hasn't figured it all out. And even if and when it does, I'll be really interested to see if science can explain where it all came from and how it all started. But anyway, that's a separate conversation. But with that said, I really appreciated the work of Dr. Dispenza, and it forced me to start evaluating how my thinking was affecting my health. And I started to make connections to some of the books I had read throughout the health journey, including two big ones. One is called The Body Electric by Dr. Robert O. Becker. Another one is called Light Shaping Life, Biophotons in Biology and Medicine by a Dutchman named Roland van Wyk. And this, it's spelled like Van Wyk, W-I-J-K, but Light Shaping Life. It's a textbook. proper textbook.
Yeah.
And these books, Light Shaping Life, focused on how it covered the research in biophotons, which is basically light generated by cells. So light emitted by cells, and how cells communicate with light, and how the stimulus for cell division, which is literally the most fundamental of processes for all life, because if your cells can't divide, you can't grow from an embryo to a human. So that stimulus is cells pulse extreme low frequency ultraviolet light, which stimulates cell division. And even when sperm meets egg, there's actually videos showing this massive light release that occurs in that moment. So cells and life are fundamentally inextricably linked to light and light energy. And then the body electric, slightly different, but very similar. Dr. Becker was studying how bioelectromagnetism, so how energy operates in our body, and how the way that cells are organized is by a guiding energetic field. Some spiritual folks might call it an aura or an energy field or whatever. But he was addressing the missing answer in biology, which is, if all cells have the same 23 chromosomes, how do the eye cells know to become eye cells in that particular place? And if all cells have the same 23 chromosomes, how do eye cells know to become eye cells, for example, retinal cells and so on? How do cells in the heart know to become heart cells? They all have the same exact 23 chromosomes, the same exact genetic information. So what tells the cells, or how do they know to become what they become? And what Dr. Becker found is that there is basically a guiding field of information which directs how cells become what they become. In other words, there is a kind of field of energy which directs our biological development and biological function. Like in the case of salamanders, which can lose an entire limb and regrow it, there's a kind of guiding energy field which directs the cells where they're supposed to go. And one could even take this to say that we aren't the physical body that we see, we are the energy field that we don't see. And the physical body is kind of just a representation of it. A very interesting question would be, people say, like a kind of cliche science thing. People say, every 7 years, all the cells in your body turn over completely. So you're actually a completely different person. Okay, well, how do you remember things that happened more than 7 years ago, right? Yep. There's some sort of continuity, right, in energy. And so anyway, these two books, The Body Electric and Light Shaping Life, had given me this kind of foundation to understand spirituality, or what I would call inner light. But I didn't really take it. I had no basis on which to apply it practically or make practical meaning of that information until I was struggling so much personally in my own head, in my own mind, and looking for meaning, and came across the work of Dr. Dispenza, as I mentioned, and started to really reflect internally and practice some of these meditation techniques and so on. And I started to tie it together to all the things that I had studied and realized, I think what I'm doing right now is cultivating my inner light. So I'm not just caring about the light that's outside of me and how it's affecting me. I'm actually working on what's inside, right? And I think that the reason I say it's my favorite step of the light diet is because I actually think it's the most important by far. I've come to believe quite a lot, actually, personally, and a lot of the sort of spiritual mysteries of many of the great religions and great yogis and masters and saints, which many people would say are very unscientific. But if they read The Body Electric and Light Shaping Life, they would probably think it's not so unscientific anymore. At least there's a basis in Western scientific research of how these things that have been claimed and told about for millennia could actually exist. Doesn't mean they're all true, but at least there is a foundation. And it changed my life. Like I started to do this inner work, and I went from being pretty stressed and unhappy and miserable, lacking direction and so on, to kind of determining or deciding that I wanted to be happy. I wanted to enjoy my life. And I just had to figure out what that looked like for me. And, to spare you, there's a longer story, but basically my business was reflecting my internal world. So it was struggling, and I wasn't like ready to lean in. And I went inside and I started asking questions, and I basically decided to reanalyze everything in my life and in my business. And I asked myself the question, what would my life look like? What would my company look like if I really enjoyed it? And I realized that what I had to do was create a vision that was so great that it was genuinely exciting to pursue because it seemed impossible. Like, so there were all those 3 or 4 years when I had started my company and was running it 3 years, but it felt like a lifetime getting to that point where I was struggling. 3 years traveling alone primarily it's a long time, especially when you're 20, 21. It feels like ages. And so I had this idea in the back of my head, like, I really want to build a lighting company. I really want to make light therapy products. I want to make, my eyewear products even better and expand the line, right? And a lot of those things that I started ideating then around 2021, the beginning of 2021, it's 4 years later. A lot of them still haven't come to fruition. But the last 4 years have been so enjoyable and so inspiring because I changed my mindset. I decided that I don't just want to keep living my life day to day in the stress and problems of what's going on every day. I'm going to create a huge, ambitious vision of what I actually dreamed of when I was even younger, before starting the company, like what I wanted to create, and just start taking the next steps in that direction. And then the whole journey became so much more enjoyable because it was like still have this huge goal of actually fixing the lighting of the whole world, which is pretty ambitious, right? Like, all the lights everywhere are terrible and we have to fix that. So that's a pretty, like, it takes a lot of energy, and it brought me out of like this obsessive, self-focused state to there's something bigger and I'm just going to keep working on it. And that's been pretty good. And it, honestly,
that's
like,
awesome, brother. That's awesome.
Yeah. So
those steps for the light diet. The light diet. I mean, we'll put the steps too. I mean, with Christy and I can put it on there, like, and any information anybody out there hears about the light diet and about the steps to like create. And I mean, we really are thankful because, I mean, you have great products. I use mine every day. Literally, I bought an eyeglass stand in my office so I can just put them there, and I change out the styles every day, man.
Oh, man.
And you're so gracious, brother. I truly am. And your light and your vitality, man, really means a lot to me. And I know that people can see it.
Thank you,
keep
brother.
doing it.
Thank you.
Keep doing it. And
thank you. You too, man. I love speaking with you. I was so excited to do this podcast. I was like, oh man, that's exciting. I'm excited to speak to you.
No, I totally am too. So much. I love hearing the science behind it. I love light therapy. I love the body electric. What was the one? Light changing life,
biophotons in biology and medicine.
Okay, I'm gonna get that because I have bioelectric. I love this biophotons. I'll put that. I'll check it out, brother. And then tell everybody how to find you. I know like they can go to Raw, but can you tell them the website and your Instagram feed?
Yeah. So the website is Ra, as in the Egyptian god of light, sunlight, raoptics.com. And then the Instagram is raw_optics. And we have a great team, putting together a lot of really interesting content. So great stuff coming there on the Raw Optics Instagram page in particular. We're active there, getting more active on X. And then if somebody wants to find me personally, I'm at The Light Diet on Instagram, on X as well, primarily active on Instagram. And on our website, we do have an introduction to the light diet, just a blog. So if you just search introduction to the light diet on Google, it'll come up, and that kind of puts some of these steps together. It's shape shifting the light diet, but the core principles remain the same overall. And I just really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to speak and share all this information. I know it's really important for people. I know it's really overlooked right now. I know that a lot of people are really stressed today, and there are a lot of factors contributing to their stress, and low quality light shouldn't be one of them. And so we want to help people fix that. And the whole mission of the company, and this was a turning point, was when I had to really redefine and understand what we're doing. We believe as a company that that greatness lives within everybody. Everybody has unlimited potential. And so what we do is we use the science of light to create products that help people transform their health and access the unlimited potential that's within them. So it's not about like, oh, you need to buy this to do, you already have it in you. We're giving you a tool to help you improve your health, to help you make your body function better so that you don't have to focus on that. You can focus on what really matters in life to you. So that's what we're all about.
That's beautiful. Yeah. Well, Man, I'm so glad we got to have you on here, my man. And I know you're traveling the world, but we got to keep in touch more. And I'm mean that. And everybody, please look at his information. Look at Raw Optics. I wear them. I am not just telling you guys this. I tell you the honest truth. Like, I literally feel more at ease. I feel my body has less tension when the first time I use them. And like when I'm at the day and I'm running pretty hard, even with working with people, because I'm working on people every day, I just want everybody to know that literally I feel like more balanced. So that's one way I'm telling you, you will definitely feel balanced. And I'm just, everything he's talking about is the science behind it is what I wanted to hear today. And I'm so thankful, man. And
thank you.
And just remember, everybody out there, if you guys have any questions about blue light, please forward them this podcast. Check out Matt, follow everything they do. And we really appreciate everybody out there listening to us. So until next time, everybody, just like and subscribe. And if you guys have any more information, just hit up Matt, send him a message. And Matt, we appreciate you, man. I know you're in Germany, man. I know it's a little bit later there, so go have, maybe get some rest time. All right, man. I appreciate you.
Yeah, I will. And I'll just say, everybody, look out for our new product launch of our new circadian strengthening lenses. The first ever lens to strengthen the circadian rhythm during daytime. So all the sunset lenses, they all act in the evening on sleep. This is the first lens ever to help strengthen the rhythm during the day and in the morning in particular. So I'm going to send you a pair as well, and you're going to like
Thanks,
them.
brother. I'll take them. I mean, I'll wear them.
So much,
I appreciate
really
it.
appreciate it. Take care.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Take it easy.